There are some truly great horror movies out there in the world, we know this. However, there are some movies that are so effective they burrow deep into your brain with no way of getting them out. You'll often find yourself thinking about these movies before you go to bed, or in the middle of the night when you go to the bathroom. Maybe you see a shadow and it reminds you of the Moonlight Man from Gerald's Game, or maybe you hear a noise and you think the Babadook is near. No matter what it is, these movies should not be watched at night for a reason, and they should definitely be watched with a friend. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary horror movies you shouldn't watch at 3 AM. Before I begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments, and with that, let's jump in. Coming in at number 5 we have The Strangers, 2008. The Strangers is a 2008 slasher film written and directed by Brian Bottino. The plot centers on Kirsten, played by Liv Tyler, and James, played by Scott Speedman, whose stay at a vacation home is disrupted by 3 masked criminals who infiltrate the home. Now, the movie is inspired by real-life events: the Manson family tape murders, a multiple homicide, the Keddy cabin murders that occurred in Keddy, California, and a series of break-ins that occurred in his neighborhood as a child. Now, what makes this movie so terrifying is chillingly delivered in one line at the end of the movie. Why are you doing this? Because you are home. Terrifying. When there is no rhyme or reason for such horrific onslaught, that is when fear grows 10 times larger. There are no preventable measures, no inkling that something is coming. The only thing the couple did wrong was be home and answer the door. Now, the movie may not be the best when it comes to writing, however, it makes up for it in suffocating atmosphere. If you find yourself home alone as well as awake at 3 AM, don't put on The Strangers, because you may find yourself hiding in your closet holding a baseball bat for the rest of the night. Coming in at number 4, It Follows, 2014. Now, this horror film perhaps divides people more so than any other on our list, but in my personal opinion, I think it is absolutely terrifying. It Follows is a 2014 supernatural psychological horror film written and directed by David Robert Mitchell, and follows a teenage girl named Jay who is pursued by a supernatural entity after a sexual encounter. Now, the best way to describe It Follows is 100 minutes of pure cinematic anxiety. Now, a teenager played by Maika Monroe is infected with a sexually transmitted virus in which the victim is relentlessly pursued by a slow-moving yet murderous supernatural entity, and the only way to rid yourself of this entity is to have sex with someone else, in turn passing the virus on. However, if the person you passed it on to is killed by the forces, the virus will default back to the previous victim. Now, I watched this movie for the very first time in the middle of the night, and I had major regrets about the entire thing. The film is so terrifying because it doesn't pose a lot of jump scares, but instead a more pervasive atmospheric sense of fear. A tall man with black eyes slowly walking into a room, an unseen force in a swimming pool, an old woman walking down the halls of a school during the day. What makes It Follow so effective is that it relies on classic horror movie scares, the slow-moving villains like Michael Myers, a supernatural force that no matter where you go or how fast you run, you know they're gonna get you some way or another. Coming in at number 3, we have The Vanishing, 1988. The Vanishing, also known as Traceless or Without a Trace, is a 1988 Dutch horror film directed by George Sluizer, and stars Jean Bevotz as a man who searches obsessively for his girlfriend following her disappearance at a rest area. Now, there is perhaps no horror movie in history that so convincingly depicts terrifying evil quite like this movie. Now, what makes this movie so unique is the simple fact that the movie introduces you to the villain early on, with him turning out to be the furthest thing from a typical movie psychopath. I don't want to ruin the ending for you, but the climax is one that is truly unforgettable and one that should not be spoiled. The Vanishing was praised on international release, with it making the top foreign films of 1991 in the United States. Roger Ebert even wrote his approval of the movie in the Chicago Sun-Times, stating, "One of the most intriguing things about The Vanishing is the film's unusual structure, which builds suspense even while it seems to be telling us almost everything we want to know." Director of The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, thought The Vanishing was the most terrifying film he had ever seen, even more frightening than his own film, The Shining, and called Sluizer to discuss editing. Big moves. Coming in at number 2, Sinister, 2012. In my opinion, Sinister is a highly underrated horror movie that we just don't talk about enough. Also, Ethan Hawke. What a guy. Sinister is a 2012 supernatural horror film directed and co-written by Scott Derrickson. The plot revolves around fictional true crime writer Ellison Oswald, played by Hawk, whose discovery in the attic of his new house of a box of home movies depicting grisly murders puts his entire family in danger. Now, the movie itself was inspired by a nightmare that co-writer C. Robert Cargill had after watching The Ring, in which he discovered a film in his attic depicting the hanging of an entire family. The scenario ultimately became the setup for the plot of Sinister. The movie is absolutely terrifying, with one of the scariest horror monsters appearing on screen. That's right, I said it. Sinister was a critical and commercial success, with the movie receiving a score of 64% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading. Its plot hinges on typical implausible horror movie behavior and recycles countless genre cliches, but Sinister delivers a surprisingly number of fresh, diabolical twists. Now, although it may be the most conventional horror movie on our entire list, the movie does have a familiar take on supernatural horror. The movie has some truly heart-racing moments, with an intense ending that will make you never want to move house again. And if you recently moved house, I suggest you don't watch this movie, especially not at 3 AM. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Wreck, 2007. This 2007 Spanish found footage horror movie is by far one of the scariest movies I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's saying something. Not only is it the greatest found footage horror movie, but also one of the best zombie horror movies. It is definitely worth your attention. Just not at 3 AM, that's for sure. It could be 2 PM and I'd still be shaking in the corner of the room. Anyway, let's get to the movie. Wreck was co-written and directed by Jaime Balagoro and Paco Plaza, with the film centering on a reporter and her cameraman covering a firefighter intervention in an apartment building in Barcelona. As the situation escalates after some of the building's occupants show animalistic and murderous behavior, the reporter and cameraman find themselves confined inside the perilous building. Soon enough, all hell breaks loose from within, with it quickly becoming apparent that the apartment block they are trapped inside is housing something far more sinister than anyone ever expected. The movie was a critical success, with it being recognized as one of the early successes and one of the best films in the found footage genre. The film went on to spawn the Wreck film series, consisting of Wreck 2, Wreck 3 Genesis, and Wreck 4 Apocalypse. Sadly, like any good horror movie, there was a pointless and incompetent American remake named Quarantine that was released just a year later. If you value your time, be sure to skip out on that one and instead rewatch Wreck for the 10th time like me. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos, top 5 scary prisons throughout human history. Craig Harold said, "May I request a top 5 scary insane asylum/mental institutions throughout history?" Yes, you can request it. Whether it will happen, it's not my call, but you can request it. I'll pass along your message. Kenny Ogletree said, "Nothing is scarier than the prison that is your heart, Lucy." Nothing. Wow. You must know me really well, thank you. What a compliment. Michael Johnson said, "Miss you, Lucy." Miss you too. Aurelia Ramsey said, "The scariest thing is that background and a smiling Lucy." Ain't that the truth? I have issues with that picture. Eternal Communism 1974 said, "Lucy McPhee, no prisons can hold the Pale Queen, for she can break steel bars with ease, then devours both prisoners and guards. Yummy." You're just talking about my childhood at this point. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later.